The port of Dover is a major pipeline for trade between the UK and the EU. Lorries drive through without any border checks, but a no-deal Brexit could change that. Authorities have called in 100 lorries for a mock exercise. They're hoping to figure out the likely impact of a hard Brexit and its border delays. But even those taking part in the test don't think it will prepare them.
This trial is on far too small a scale. It's just about 100 lorries when about 10,000 lorries come to the Channel ports every single day.
I'm not sure really. I've wasted time personally, but at the end of the day, what will be, eh?
Without a deal with the EU, customs checkposts would have to be set up at all of the UK's ports and borders, causing delays to shipments. Economists warn it could raise costs for the country's financial, chemical and automotive industries. And the IMF says it would shave off 6% from the country's GDP. Prime Minister Theresa May is warning of a far greater risk of voting against her plan.
People's faith in the democratic process and their politicians would suffer catastrophic harm. We all have a duty to implement the result of the referendum.
But the opposition's not convinced and says it will try to topple May's government.
We will table a motion of no confidence in the government at a time of our choosing, but it's going to be soon.
Tories out! Refugees in!
On Monday, hundreds of protesters backed the call for early elections.
We're now in a situation where if something doesn't happen pretty quickly, we're going to get to the 29th of March and we're going to leave the European Union without any deal at all. That's going to be a complete disaster.
I think we need a general election and then take that to the people and then a complete change of government.
But another vote would take time, something the UK doesn't have much of because it's supposed to leave the EU in a little more than 2 months. And if lawmakers can't agree to a deal by then, many businesses will be left to deal with the consequences. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
Let's get more on this now from Denis MacShane in London. He's a former Europe Minister for the UK government under the previous Labour government. Welcome back to the program. So we heard that Theresa May issue quite a stark warning, essentially targeting MPs, saying that if they vote to reject her deal, it might jeopardise Brexit altogether. I'm wondering, in your view, is she simply scaremongering here, or is there a real risk that Brexit might not happen if this deal does get rejected?
She is sticking very, very stubbornly, like a limpet, to her deal, even though everybody who's examined it agrees it's unworkable, it will leave Britain without any economic future, tremendous uncertainty, endless rows. But it's the only deal she's got in her pocket. One thing that's developed this afternoon that's new is that in 1997 there was a referendum to set up an assembly in Wales, a parliament in Wales. This was passed by the people, and then Mrs May and other Conservative MPs tried to defeat it in the House of Commons. So she's actually on very weak ground when she says you have to respect the referendum above all other things in life. So it looks as if it's going to be defeated tomorrow. What happens after that? It's terra incognita, unknown territory, anybody's guess.
I want to canvass those possibilities in a moment, but we also got this much anticipated so-called assurance from the European Union ahead of this vote. The EU promises that if the so-called Irish backstop were to be implemented, that it will only be used for the shortest amount of time possible. Why has this assurance failed to sway MPs both from within Theresa May's party and the opposition?
Well, very simply, the core message in that letter was, signed by Donald Tusk, the President of the European Council, and Jean-Claude Juncker, the President of the Commission. It said, we will not change a single word in the withdrawal agreement or the political declaration. What they then go on to say is, we hope it won't be necessary, but quite clearly, Europe, in the sense of the 27 independent governments and the people in Brussels themselves, they're sticking with the Irish government, who say if you bring back a hard border, as the right-wing, anti-European hard Brexiters want, that is likely to lead to a return to violence on the island of Ireland. And nobody is having that except these very hardliners. So the Brussels letter, frankly, says nothing new at all. And therefore, those who want to see the right of Britain to impose a hard border in Northern Ireland have been very disappointed and are angry.
And let's go back to what happens if and when this deal does fail in the UK Parliament. So under changes proposed last week or passed last week, the government will then have 3 days to come up with a plan B. In your view, what does a plan B look like?
That's the big question. It could be something very dramatic, like the former Prime Minister Sir John Major's proposed, and the very senior Conservative former Finance Minister Ken Clarke. They have said, in effect, revoke, pull back Article 50 and reflect, have 2 or 3 years proper study. We've done none of this in the nearly 3 years since we voted out of Europe. We've not had a proper in-depth investigation of what Brexit means. What people voted on in June 2016 was nothing like the chaos we've got now. That's one possibility. Very dramatic for Mrs May to say Parliament should reverse the referendum, but she voted for it herself in 1997. Another idea would be to have a new referendum, just to simply say, look, people of Britain, we're so blocked here, our MPs can't settle or decide on anything, you have to decide the question again. I don't think she'd like that, but that's an alternative. The third is just to limp towards the 29th of March, and we leave with emergency arrangements in place, I expect, so it wouldn't be the total chaos, but it would be a very fractious and it would be a disaster for the UK economy, sending a message to the world that the British Parliament, the British government, British business can't even put their knickers, their pants on in the morning because we're just so stuck and incompetent at the moment.
As you say, Denis, uncharted waters for the UK. Denis MacShane, former Europe Minister, thank you again for your time.